Hello and welcome to week 6. I can't believe we're already here. So, this week we are going to talk about interventions. And a lot of people think about interventions as just academics, but it is also with behavior, and we're going to discuss that. So, first, let's look at what exactly are interventions. So, intervention refers to a target evidence based instructional strategy that has a support system that addresses the student specific needs, whether it's academic or behavioral. And these often kind of change from school to school. And I'll go into that a little bit more. But some key characteristics is first, purposeful. You have to make sure that you understand what the student needs, and it's not just like, oh, this student is low. Well, what are they low in? Is it multiplication facts? Is it how they do them as arrays? Or is it just straight facts? Is it 2-digit by 2-digit? You have to know specifics. And then data driven. So based on assessments, not just, oh, well, I think they're low, or no, it needs to be like they are performing significantly below their classmates. Timely. Also, make sure that you're not waiting forever. And that's on you as a teacher. I'll go into a little bit of a story of a student that I had later on when we get into the process. But make sure that you are identifying those gaps and implementing strategies right off the bat in a timely manner, not just waiting and just saying they're low. And then flexibility, making sure that you adjust based on the student's progress, response, how they're doing, whether that's academic or behavior. Now, this kind of surprised me at first when I saw this, when I was first learning it, I feel like 100 years ago. But tier 1, so there's 3 different tiers to MTSS. Tier 1 is where the majority of your students will be. That is your instruction. And that's your everyday lessons, all of that. 80% of your students should be in there successfully. Then you go into tier 2, which is where those students that need more help, and you start pulling them into small group. Now, if you're not at that 80% for your tier 1, then you need to readjust your teaching. But if you are at that basically 80% when students are taking tests, then that 15% that is not scoring where the rest of their classmates are, that's when you pull them into small groups. That's where you start identifying where are their struggles. How can I help them? What are their exact needs, both academically and behavioral? So that happens in your classroom. That's where you're starting to target those interventions. What do they need help with? And usually it's a whole long process. I've had students that stay in the tier 2s for years, that they are just a struggling student, that they don't qualify for EC services, but they're not scoring where the rest of their peers are. So they just stay in that tier 2 process. I've also seen where students, and I had a 5th grader that was in the tier 2 process, and she was in like 1st or 2nd grade, and I documented everything. If that is one thing I can stress, document everything. Cover your tail and have those documentations. And I'll show you how I did mine. And this is just one example, but this is what worked for me. But I'll do that later on. But I finally got her identified, and she qualified for EC services. And they even said she should have been in EC long before 5th grade. But it took me and all my documentation and hounding people. So if you know a student needs to be in it, push for it. And then tier 3 is that specialized, individualized instruction. That's usually your 504s and your IEPs, but that is not all of your students. So again, tier 1 is the majority of your students. Tier 2 is where they need support, and that's within your classroom. You might have somebody come in, but that depends on district, school, all of the things. But I would say 9 times out of 10, that is in your classroom. And then tier 3 is when they do special education. So here are some strategies and implementation. So academic. So be very direct with your instruction. And I'll show you some examples. Sorry, I feel like I'm jumping through that. But this should be differentiated instruction tailored to what they specifically need. And at least for me in the upper grades, peer tutoring was not a strategy I like to use. It is a strategy, especially in the younger grades where they just think that they're buddying. But once you get up there, that's where you really start to see those academic gaps and where peers know that, oh, this kid is struggling. They already know they can just read the room, but you don't want to put more of that on there. And then remedial instruction. Have a time in your day, however you can, that 20 minutes is when you're going to pull kids, whether that is everyone's working on something and then you're pulling kids. I mean, I pulled kids every day, whether that was something that I needed them to do, or it's like, hey, let me help you on this. Come to my back table. And I never wanted the back table to be a punishment or them to not feel smart. So I would pull anybody and everybody, whether they were absent, whether they were excelling and I needed them to do this. That way, the back table, it was a comfortable spot and it wasn't this like, oh, you're dumb for going back there. So those are more academic. Behavioral, this kind of depends on your school. A lot of schools do PBIS, which is Positive Behavioral Intervention System, which is very similar to the Positive Behavior Support, which is where you're looking more at the positive and reinforcing the positive rather than harping on the negative. Self-monitoring, teaching students to track and reflect their behavior. I mean, I always use myself as an example. I was like, oh, that wasn't the best Dr. Kuntz behavior. And then we would discuss it or something like that. And then social skills instruction, that goes kind of with your SEL or your social emotional learning curriculum. And you'll probably have to do that a little bit. But just making sure that they are self-aware. But with behavior, document anything and everything. Have a spreadsheet, have all of your students' names, and then put the date and what happened. It can be a quick, had to tell them several times in class to stop talking. But you want that documentation so in case you ever need to go through the TAP process for them, you would have it. So here are some best practices is conduct frequent progress monitoring, making sure that you are constantly reflecting and seeing the effectiveness. Maintain clear documentation. Document everything. Your first year, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I don't have time to document. Take that 5-7 minutes, whether that is just jotting it on your phone, having a notebook, figure out a way, but you need to have that documentation. I live by tabs on my computer. So that was a tab that just came up every day was behavior. And I just wrote it down. And oftentimes I didn't need it, but it was there just in case. And then collaborate with families, special education, support staff. You are not alone as a teacher. That is one thing that I did not learn my first year was I wanted to do it all by myself. I felt like if I reached out to one of the special education teachers about behavior or a technique that I wasn't being a good teacher or I didn't know what I was talking about. Well, to be honest, I didn't know what I was talking about. I was brand new at it and it's okay, but use those people to help you. They are here to be that support and because you don't know everything. I still don't know everything. And I would still go to them and be like, hey, this is what I'm doing. Do you have any more ideas? And then we would talk through it. And then adjust your interventions. based on the data that you have. So if they're doing really well, then move on and figure out where else they're struggling. But don't just continue it. Then monitoring progress. So using those quick assessments, formative assessments, just to do a quick check. Behavioral tracking we've kind of already discussed. And then student work analysis. You will know your students probably within the first, I would say 10 days of how they're going to perform academically and behaviorally. So start changing up your lessons. Not entirely, but maybe you need to stand by a certain student to make sure that they are on track. There was one student I knew that he was a little disorganized. So I made him a checklist. By the end of like the first month of school, he was making his checklist. But that way, that was a silly little thing that helped him stay organized. But he then took ownership of it, and we no longer had missing papers or papers all over my floor or anything like that. And then decision making. So always look for the progress. So if you see increased progress, then continue the intervention, but you can either gradually fade out. But if you're continuing to go through the tier 2 process for MTSS, then you'll want to move on to another skill. And then adequate progressing. So just make sure that you are consistent. That is a huge thing, and finding that time. Your emails, all of that can wait. Make sure that you have all of your documentation. So if something is not working, how else can you do it? Alter your approaches. Do you need to do it at a different time? For behavior, is it a student not wanting to work with another student? You've got to not just be in this one track, but really look at the big picture. So here is an example of how I did MTSS for math. And I absolutely loved this way. I had a little folder, not a folder, but a kind of a file folder thing that had a whole bunch of different copies. And at my last school, I had 90 students. Of those, I was in the tier 2 process with about 13 of them. And so I did this on 13 students, and many people would be like, holy cow. But it was very easy. I picked, usually it was like a Tuesday, Thursday that I would pull them, and I would do it 2 times a week. And I would cut this, not literally, but I would draw a line here. I don't know if you can see mine, but I would go over the example, and then I would make them do 1 and 2, and then they were done for the day. Then on Thursday, they would come back and do 3, 4, and 5 and be done. And we would check them. So it took no time at all, but I would make them do 3 problems. I would just go straight across, and that way, if I saw that they were getting it, I would finish out the page just because it didn't take long. So it usually took us about 2.5 weeks, and that's good to see, oh, they got it one day. Can they do it the next day? And I would have them have support from me in the beginning, but then gradually go away. So hopefully by the end of the sheet, they would understand the concept, and we could move on. And then I would go into my file folder, get out the next skill. But I also had a tracking sheet. I would keep all of these, and then I had a tracking sheet that had like the date, and then it had the skill that we were doing on. So it'd be creating equations from arrays, and then I would have 2/3. So they got 2 out of 3 right. That's all I did. And I had a binder just for MTSS, and each student had a divider, and I had these in there, and it took no time at all. And the first little bit, they all sat at my back table, went over what they did. But by 2nd or 3rd week, I was like, all right, can you do this for me? Can you do this? Can you do this? And And most of them by that time, that was a way for them to show off how smart they were. And that's how I phrased it, instead of, hey, you're really struggling with this. No, I would say, I need you to show off how smart you are. I need you to do this. And they would be like, okay. And they would be right on it. But this is what worked for me for math. Usually MTSS is for ELA and math. ELA, I would do basically the same thing. I didn't have to do it as much because I was more of a math and science teacher. I only had to do it for 1 year. And I would just do short little passages in a question. That was it. And I would get those off of ReadWorks. But this helped me tremendously once I got it going. So here's some key takeaways. I feel like I've talked a lot this time. Early identification. Make sure that you know where your students are. Make sure you know your kids, what they need. And then data-driven decisions. If I saw that a student was fine in multiplication, then I'm not going to give them the sheet. I'm going to go into my file folder, get something else, and give them that. Then make sure that the framework that you're using goes along with MTSS. I didn't do this whole long sheet because that's not sustainable. I need it to be quick. I need to see where they are and be able to have that data, because whenever we were going into those meetings of like, okay, do they need EC services or not? I could have all of this data, and oftentimes they're like, holy cow. And I'm like, this is why they need it. And it wasn't like, well, no, here's all the evidence. Collaborate with all of your people that are in your building. Ask veteran teachers, ask specialists, ask anybody and everybody what they've done. I mean, I'm available. If you need help, I am here. And then continuous improvement. Just monitor how they are doing and adjust. If I saw that they did not need this at all, then I'm not going to put that in there as their skill that they need to work on. So again, I am always here as a resource. If you ever need me, even after you graduate, you have my email. But if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.